Tere! Väikesed avasõnad, võib-olla alustuseks. I'm gonna do my introduction in both Estonian and English, so just be patient with me. Ma tahaksin lihtsalt alustuseks öelda seda, et mul on nii hea meel, et see üritus täna toimub. Ma tahaksin väga, et need emotsioonid, mis selle ajakirja No More Amber loomisega kaasas on käinud, kõik need jututunnid, kõik need sõidud Riia ja Vilniuse ja Truskini Kai ja Tallinna vahet. Ma tahaks, et see kõik tuleks kaasa sellega, kui te seda raamatut loete, aga te peate lihtsalt uskuma mind, et see sõit on olnud vägev ja me oleme tõesti kõik nii rõõmsad, et me saame lõpuks päriselt seda esitleda, mis me oleme 3 aastat nuputanud. So, first of all, I wish that I could communicate all these emotions and memories we have from the time where we conceived and created this book, this almanac, No More Amber, because it's something. It's one thing to present a ready publication, but you don't kind of get to convey the backstory of it. So you're just gonna have to believe me that it's been a hell of a ride riding around in the Baltics and just creating this magazine. Ja see ajakiri koosneb siis Eesti, Läti ja Leedu suurepäraste kirjanike loomingust. Siin ei ole kindlasti mingisugust paremusjärjestust või eelistust, et kes on kõigi 3 Balti riigi parimad kirjanikud, vaid see on lihtsalt üks väga mitmekesine valik neist kirjanikest, kes on igale riigile olulised. And this magazine includes 20 brilliant authors who are by no means considered as the absolute best or the only good writers or anything like that. It's just a very varied selection of the writers who we consider important and in some way influential and interesting today, but there are many more, of course. Ja me loodame, et see number ei jää viimaseks. Me tahame, et tuleks ka teine No More Amber. We also were looking forward to publishing the next No More Amber, which would include even more authors. And to begin this evening, I would like to invite here Adamas Cullenas, who's the translator of most Estonian texts presented in this book, or by most Estonian authors. Ja ma tahaksin siia nüüd õhtu sissejuhatuseks kutsuda Adamas Cullenasi, kes on enamike Eesti autorite tekstide tõlkija. Ja Adam loeb siis enda sissejuhatuse, mille ta kirjutas sellesse almanachi. And Adam will read his introduction that he wrote in this almanac.
Ma vaatan juba, siis see on väga hea siuke soojenemine või proov. Võib-olla siin on parem lugeda ja siis on valgus ja söölikkus. And just to reassure everyone, this is not a true story that ever happened, at least not 100%. Amber. Heli. She said her name was Heli. My imbecile knee-jerk response was, "You got a pitchfork to go with that?" Luckily, the one-liner soared right over her head, and I tacked the conversation along its usual course. Origins, interests. Heli was just wrapping up a degree in sociology and having a final hurrah at the tap room before heading home to a country the existence of which I was embarrassed to only be faintly aware. Google Maps. Zoom in. Blurred rooftops, reds and grays and browns, bluish streaks of water, the Baltic. Her hair brushed my forehead as we huddled over the phone. Indecipherable place names, vowels everywhere. Heli's ethereal scent in my nostrils. The flash of a pagan grin as she brushed away Aniston bangs, amber. Delicate fingertips dancing over the glow, eyes of amber embers. I was already far too many drinks deep. Friday, what can you do? At some point, the teeming crowd stonily swallowed her up, and my surroundings blurred to refilled glasses, an Uber, sheets, offensive morning sunlight. Heady. No number, no contact exchange. No mutual friends to speak of. I swore softly. Amber eyes. My phone. Search history, engage. Back to Google Maps. Back to that tiny town on the Baltic coast. Wikipedia. Population less than 10,000. Summer resort, lace curtains, and historians erotica. Artists, writers. A Swedish castle? No shit. And somewhere, threading between those coast-hugging houses, sometime soon, a pair of amber eyes. 3 months. The daily grind, pints and weekends, heli. Google's powers have long since been tapped dry. 2 weeks harder and vacation was all I could think of. I had to. Here was the same old, same old. I'd never been one to retch hard-earned cash into some rum-soaked Mexican resort anyway. So, SAS it was. Stopover pocked round trip to Tallinn, 1 class up from steerage. Aluminum silverware and all. Pays little, right? My Airbnb in the bowels of the old town was unnecessarily spacious and inflicted with ancient stone staircases that led from unlikely nooks to nowhere. I did go out that night, but kept myself in check in preparation for the coming days. I was certain that soon, somewhere, somehow, amber awaited me. The serpentine cobblestone streets were awe-inspiring for dual reasons. A, the history they so assertively radiated, and B, the seasoned tippler's instinctual awareness of the many acute spatial dangers were I to reach a certain level of intoxication despite all my valiant efforts. Then the day. I showed up to the bus station early, my hopes of riding the rails having been dashed by the barman who informed me that that line had been sold off for capitalist scrap decades ago. If I wanted to wait for the next train, then I'd be waiting at least another decade. I didn't have that kind of time. The ride was cramped, but curiously high-tech. Wi-Fi and movies all the way, though finishing any blockbuster was unlikely on the hour and some change drive. I hit the small town streets immediately after arriving at, ironically, the historical train station. Back in my hometown metropolis, randomly running into friends was a given, so how could a town of just a few thousand make my amber encounter any less likely? A couple of restaurants, handful of pubs, sparsely populated outdoor patios. Those would be my starting points. Watchful, waiting, one by one. A day, 2. The evening the 3rd, still no amber in sight. No heady. I was distraught in the spiritual freefall. I plodded along the shoreline to the point of the next peninsula and collapsed onto the warm sand to glower at the rippling sea. Heat like this and still on latitudinal par with Alaska? Insane. Here I was, some 4,500 miles from home, all alone on a moonshot to recross paths of a hazy, irresistible enigma. Yet Helly wasn't here. Absently, I slid my hands through the fine sand beneath the chance of driftwood behind me. A book, submerged, weathered yet in surprisingly fair condition. A glance at the cover. I closed my eyes, rolled back my head, and exhaled to the point of emptiness, grinning madly the way one does when all is lost, but fate opts to jab a little deeper. No more amber. I flipped to the first page.
When I read Adam's introduction at first, it immediately reminded me of how this magazine came to being. Basically, we had this nice subsidy for the three writers' unions, the Estonian, the Latvian, and the Lithuanian. This sounds like the beginning of an anecdote, which kind of is, but it's a good anecdote because it ended up with this. So we had this subsidy for mobility to go and visit each other's literary events, to get to know each other's scenes a little better, and just kind of help to make this literary exchange work even better than it does right now, because it's a fact that there are not many translators who can move between Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, and back. We have some future translators here, but the fact is there are not many, and we wanted to make this literary communication work. So with this subsidy, we had basically two options. We could have just visited each other's events, drink wine, eat well, sleep at fancy hotels, and have some fun. Our other option was to create something that would actually work, or try to make it work, or try to create something that can be useful for our literary scene, and to introduce our literature to the outside world. So, as you can see, we kind of did those two. We tried to combine the wine, the hotels, the dining, and the festivals with actually getting inspiration to create something that would represent the Baltic literature to the outside world, and to have something that we really enjoy creating and that we see a point in. And we wanted to find the right editors to do so. But somehow it was clear right away that the Estonian editor has to be Benediktas, the Latvian editor has to be Tomas Treibergas, and the Lithuanian editor has to be Maria Esko. And the editors are represented tonight by Tomas Treibergas. So,
here I come.
there you go.
Yeah. So let's the party started, yeah? By some words of me, thank you, about the marvelous introduction, Maria. And once upon a time, I thought that it is really weird to name one's work of art, whether it would be painting, film, or a book, or a piece of music, as a child of creation, because it sounded so like from a woman's magazine. Probably there are some good women's magazines. I haven't. There are some of them are, but yeah, this metaphor about child of creation sounded really weird and outlandish somehow. But with this almanac, it was the first time when I understood that actually it is possible to have a child as a work, as a collaborator, a work of a literature in this case, and also a work of collaboration. And we saw different variations of the cover, for example. We saw different variations of the inlays, and to follow the parable, there were like clothes, when parents choose clothes for a waiting baby. And then it arrived, and it was so pure and innocent and etc. But it arrived actually before the middle of the summer, and then we started to think about, at one point, we will have to educate our child. And today, me and Svenas. You will meet him after a while. We were into the bookstore called Bibliothek, which is in the Apparat district, the creative district. And it was the first place when I saw the magazine in a bookshelf. And then I understood, okay, he's now in a, like, it's the 1st September, like first day of school for him. And actually, at one side, it is, of course, a bit silly, but on another side, to be living with this project for about a year and a half, it is, this notion that we brought up a child and we have to let him go to the university as well. And afterwards, we have to find him a proper job. And afterwards, we have to find him a proper family or a partner, and then a family. And after this awkward introduction, I will read a poem which is like a letter from one of the editors. Adam has this possibility to dive into this editorial board because he grasped some notion that some other of our colleagues couldn't. And I grasped one, in, so to say, intonation of what was between us, the makers of the magazine, when we meet each other in Zoom conferences, tired and a bit with not very concentrated eyesight. O cheap fortune, hear my silent shout at the seaside, at the limit of my powers, whom I have to share with my mother. There, far across the land, and not so far again if revised. Or hear my bunch of microscopic peasants shouting, onwards, onwards, onwards. I want to tell you all the truth. I want to wash myself clean from the dirt of beer, of local chatter, clean of literature itself, as if I've drowned in it, but somehow even want to drown in it. Amber, you, the wholest fragment of the bypassed future, bring your silence on. This is the only soundtrack no Shazam on earth can resolve. Come, here, silence, embrace me with the crown, which is made from tears of others. Embrace me here, in nothingness, in the hidden promise of absolute truth. And by this I declare my next collection of poems will be in English, which is a lie, but I give the board to Maria and thank you for your attention, and I hope you will stay with us for the whole evening on.
Thank you, Toms. Well, let's get to the poetry then, okay? Our first performing author of No More Amber is from Lithuania, Giedrė Kazlauskaitė, and she will be reading her poems in Lithuanian and Adam will be reading the translations to English.
Good evening, it's nice to be here. I'm first time in Estonia, and it's strange because it's not very far, but I'm here for the first time. So I'm very happy. Tartu is a beautiful city and a big university. Some famous Lithuanian writers have studied here, and that's interesting. Kaip prišaukti lietų? I will explain. It's a poem it's a love poem for my therapist. Pagelėse lubinai mėlynuoja ir kraujažolės baltos, rusiškas porcelianas. Žalmargės braido po tą servizą, pienas į kavą. Traukiniai geriausia terapija, žiūri pievą už lango kaip į geriausią tapybą. Rajono bibliotekoje nuo stendų į mane žvelgia blizgus žurnalas, kurio pavadinimas skamba taip, kaip ir jūsų vardas. Tokia lietinga vasara, tyčia prišaukiau lietų. Iš to žurnalo lankščiau origami, skaičiau Rudinesko knygas. Žinios parodė užtvindytą derlių. Per tautosakos paskaitas mokė, reikia sugauti šikšnosparnį, nunešus į skruzdėlyną užkasti, susivinioti savo galvą su kokiu skuduru, kad negirdėtum cypimo. Kitą dieną atėjus iškasti, rasi tik tai kaulelius. Bus toksai kobiniukas, su juo ką norėsi, tą paviliosi. Mojuodama šikšnosparnio kauleliu, tari jūsų vardą ir tai apsėda. Sapne įsikūnija nedidelį debesėlį, kurio negaliu išmesti. Įskrieja aplink mano galvą, jam išdygsta velnio ragai. Debesėlį juodbruvėlį, ant mūsų, duosiu tau brūsą. Uždavinėjote man kvailus klausimus tipinėmis formuluotėmis. Pavyzdžiui, apie ką šitas pyktis? Apie išlikimą dirvoj pūvant daržovėms.
So I'll be reading the translations of Prima Vista. How to summon the rain. Lupines turn blue along the road, and the milfoil is white, like Russian porcelain. Mottled cows wade through that tea set, milk poured into coffee. Trains, the best therapy. You look at the meadows beyond the glass, as into the greatest paintings. A shiny magazine gazes at me from the stand of a regional library. Its name sounds just like yours. Such a rainy summer. I summoned the rain on purpose, folding origami from that magazine, reading the books of Maria Esko. The news show flooded crops. From the lectures on folklore, I learned you have to first catch a bat, then wrap your head with some rag so as to not hear the high-pitched clicks while taking it to the anthill for burial. The next day you dig it up and find only bones. There will be a kind of hook. Grab what you want with that. Waving the backbone, I utter your name and becomes possessed. It turns into a little cloud in my dream, one that I can't throw away. It flies around my head. It grows demonic horns. Little dark-haired cloud, rain on us. I'll give you a dust cloth. You ask me silly questions with usual formulations, such as, what is this anger really about? About survival, vegetables, rotting in the soil.
Visi žmonės niekšai. Man atrodo, mačiau jo paskutiniosiomis jos gyvenimo dienomis Halės beigelinėje. Visai gali būti, nes netrukus pasklido gandas apie dingimą, o dar vėliau apie žmogžudystę. Laikraščiai įsidėjo info, kad jį pirko butą stoties rajone, o ją nužudė statybininkai narkomanai. Štai ir dabar sėdžiu beigelinėje, ėdu beigelį su lašiša, vartau spalvotus žurnalus su žmonėmis, kurie man visiškai neįdomus. Bet vartau prisiversdama, nes pažįstami man sako, lavintis, tu gyveni hermetiškame dramblio kaulo bokšte. Kaip aš turėčiau nušvisti? Kad svetimų interjerai staiga taptų gražus, kad patikėčiau nors vienu jų žodžiu. Už lango prekiaujama šlaitėmis ir bulvėmis, siaučia netikėtas gegužės sniegas, pardavėjas šūkauja "S Novim godom". Prieš 2 metus, kai ją čia pamačiau, plaukėme valtimi viename interneto forume. Ir pluoti buvo sunku, nuo vyno apsunkdavo rankos. Paskui tą valtį mes paskandinome, nes joje buvo per daug kompromato. ir viena atsisakė irkluoti, o jos keisti nebuvo. Man tai palengvėja, kai pagalvoju, kad gal ir man gyventi liko tik kokie 2 metai, o gal iš vis tik kelios valandos. Kad gal civilizacija ir iš tikrųjų degraduoja į jausmingą gegužės mėnesį, nors juokinga, kai tą skelbia susijausminę filosofai. Gal tai vienintelis būdas išgelbėti visus nuo masinės depresijos, darbo tamsiose kontorose, vienas kito skerdimo, ujimo ir neapykantos. Ak, beviltiška optimistė, sako draugužis poetas. Vis tebemosuoja plakatu, be entis nėra.
All people suck. I think I saw her during the last days of her life in the bagel shop of Halle's market. That could well be, for soon after rumors flew of her disappearance, and later still of her murder. The newspapers informed us that she bought a flat near the train station and was killed by drug addicts. So now I'm sitting in the bagel shop, eating a bagel and lox, paging through magazines with people of no interest to me. But I'm forcing myself because my friends tell me I need to learn about life, living as I do in an ivory tower. Oh, how I would like the bulb to light up, for the interiors of strangers to seem beautiful so that I could believe a single word they say. Outside the window, they're selling potatoes and pansies. An unexpected snow is falling in May, the seller shouting, "Snow golden!" 2 years ago, when I saw her here, we were rowing a boat in an internet forum. It was hard going, hands heavy from wine. Then we scuttled that boat because it held compromising materials, and because one person decided not to row. There was no one to take her place. It becomes easier for me to think that maybe I only have 2 years to live, or maybe just a few hours. That maybe civilization really is degrading if it's snowing already in May, though that thought always seems ridiculous when impassioned philosophers express it. Maybe that's the only way to save everybody from mass oppression, from work, in dim offices, from slaughtering each other, from inveterate hectoring and hatred. Oh, such a hopeless optimist, says my poet friend, always waving a sign, the end is near.
And the last poem, it's a quite sad poem because I'm working in a newspaper, it's cultural weekly, and all people are sending text by emails, but there are some who haven't emails and still are writing by hand. And there was one woman, I don't really know, maybe she's a little bit mentally ill, but she was not bad for it. She was coming and saying, please buy, I have written a poem, maybe you could buy it, but please, I'd like money at once, please buy cash. So it was sad and prekyba eilėraščiais. Pamenu, man buvo 17, tėvai vežėsi automobiliu, parodyti dvarų Kėdainių apylinkėse. Skaičiau Oskaro Milašiaus poeziją, o jie diskutavo, kaip neva jo eilėraščiuose jaučiasi šizofrenija. Mulkiais laikiau jos, vis dėlto buvo jauku, tik taip jos kartu ir atsimenu. Dabar viskas kitaip. Tu vairuoji, dainuoja Piaf, aš mazgu, vaikas miega, idilė. Piaf dainuoja apie klouną, kurio žmona neištikima, o jam tenka plauti indus. Žmogus pats nežino, kaip jis atsirado. Iš pradžių juk nekalbėjo, kalbą išmoko vartoti vėliau, jau nudobęs mamutą. Ir tie, kurie tikisi užsidirbti rašydami poeziją, visgi pasirinko ne visai tą sritį. Mes sarėme ir arėme neapmokamuose darbuose, todėl apie mūsų literatūrą sako, kad jie agrarinė. Kiti dvokia žvėrių ir papūsiais obuoliais. Nenorime sėdėti šalia jų autobusuose, nes jie patys to nežinodami nebenulaiko šlapimo. Bet pro tas smirdinčias kelias mes įėjome ir išėjome. Nė viena nėra į pasaulį atkeliavusio kitokiu būdu. Atnešiu eilėraštį spausdinimui, bet norėčiau, kad sumokėtumėte iš karto.
Selling poems. I remember when I was 17, my parents took me by car to see the manors around Kėdainiai. I was reading the poetry of Oskar Miloš, and they were talking about how you can feel schizophrenia in his work. I thought them dolts. Still, it was cozy. I only remember them together like that. Everything is different now. You're driving, Piaf is singing, I'm knitting, our child is sleeping. Idyllic. Piaf is singing about a clown whose wife is unfaithful, so he has to wash the dishes. Humans don't know how they came to be. They didn't speak at first. Language came later, having killed the mammoth. And those who think to make a living through poetry probably chose the wrong field. We plow and we sow in unpaid labor, which is why they say our literature is agrarian. Others smell of animals or rotten apples. We don't want to sit next to them on the bus because they, not even aware of it, can't hold in their pee. But through those stinky holes, we went out and came in. There's no one in the world who took a different route. I brought the poem for publication, but would like you to pay me at once.
Thank you, Giedrė and Adam. Adam will have no rest, but Giedrė, we're really grateful to you for coming here, because something that we really started to enjoy during this whole process of mobility and Baltic Literary cooperation that has, like, the bit that I've been participating in has lasted for 3 years. And what I've really started to enjoy was that when we visit each other's events, be it a poetry festival in Vilnius, in Druskininkai, in Riga, or prose days in Riga, like, we visited so many festivals, and the one thing I really love every time is that when you can hear a poem or a prose piece in the original language, and you know that you're going to hear the translation, so you're kind of free of the comprehension chains, you know that you're gonna find out what it says, but you can just listen to the sound of the language and then compare it to the sound of the translation and the rhythm, how the rhythm is translated is so beautiful every time. Et asi, mida ma olen väga õppinud hindama selle Balti koostöö 3 aasta jooksul, on see, kui kirjandusüritusel saab kuulata tekste originaalkeeles ja sa tead, et sa kuuled tõlget ka, sa saad teada, mida see tekst tähendab ja sa saad lihtsalt helile keskenduda ja sellele, kuidas rütm on tõlgitud ja sellele, kuidas need keeled kõlavad. Ja see tunne on nii hea olnud, nii et ma soovitan teil, kui teil on mahti, siis näiteks detsembris toimub Riias proosafestival, minge kuulama, ja tegelikult veel varem oktoobris on võimalik Vilniuses ja Druskininkais luulefestivalil kuulata seda rütmi ja heli tõlke ilu. But our next poet who will be performing today is Benediktas Januševičius, also from Lithuania, and I will introduce him with a translation of his poem that has been published in Värske Rõhk in 2020, the April issue. So if you want to listen, if you want to read more of his English, his Estonian translations in Värske Rõhk, then there are more in that issue. April 2020, Värske Rõhk. I will read a poem called Võimetu luuletus. It starts with a citation by Mikael Augustin über Gedichte. Luuletusi võib iga hetk vahetada teiste luuletuste vastu. Sel tekstil pole lõppu, võib-olla pole ka algust. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. See tekst ei suuda maailma päästa. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. Sellel tekstil pole eesmärki. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. See tekst on mõttetu. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. See tekst võiks olla ei kellegi oma. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. Sellel tekstil pole südant, mis seisma jääks. See on kõigest tekst, mis Isamaa nimel surra ei saa. See on kõigest tekst, mitte midagi muud. See tekst ei räägi armastusest. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. Ei seksist, ei surmahaigustest. Siin pole midagi kirjaski. See on kõigest tekst, ei midagi muud. Pole sõnagi kahjulikest harjumustest, suitsetamisest, joomisest, narkootikumidest. Ei leia siit vastust teile olulistele küsimustele. Näiteks, kas abikaasa on teile ikka veel truu? Kust leida hea töö? Kust kokku krabada ilgelt palju raha? Siis küsite, aga milleks selline tekst? Tekst on selline, ei midagi muud. Milleks see tekst, kui valu ei ole? Milleks tekst, kui kõik on juba selge? Raske öelda. Sellel tekstil pole suud. Ta ei saa midagi kosta. Sellel tekstil pole käsi. Ta ei saa teile viibata. Sellel tekstil pole jalgu. Ta ei saa isegi minema kõndida. See on Triin Paja tõlge. Ja nüüd neid tekste, mis on No More Amberis avaldatud, neid tuleb lugema autor ise ja tõlkeid loeb jälle Adam.
Good evening, dear friends. Poezijos vakaras. Dar tik pradžioje jau baigė spraksėti ir išėjo visi fotografai. Pirmoje eilėje įsitaisė senukas, paskutinis iš modernistų. Delną pridėjęs prie ausies įtemptai klausėsi, bet užsnūdo. Viena močiutė sprendžia kryžiažodį, kita mezga. Poetas numeris 5 ilgai varto lapus, ieškodamas eilėraščio. Dviese sėdi ir kalbasi. Jis skundžiasi likimu, ji dėmesingai linkčioja. Kai kas kenčia. Nesuprasi, ar skauda dantį, ar dėl prastų tekstų. Žmogus prie baro geria kavą ir nekvaršina savo galvos. Poetas numeris 6 daug kalba, džiaugiasi, kokie gražūs žmonės šį šaltą vakarą susirinko pasiklausyti eilių, galiausiai išeina taip niekur nepaskaitęs. Suskamba telefonas. Visada kam nors suskamba telefonas. Kai kas trypčioja vietoje. Sėskite, prašom, čia neužimta. Kai kas kosteli. Visada kas nors kosteli. O kai kas atsitempė rastą, sako, geras daiktas, pravers. Poetas numeris 9 sako, kad negali pakęsti kolegų komentuojančių savo tekstus. Skaito įsiutęs. Literatūros profesorius atsistoja ir pasišalina. Išėjo nusivemti, konstatuoja nesvarbus poetas. Renginio vedėja ar organizatoriai piktai dėbteli į mane. Vilčių teikiantis jaunuolis mintise kurpia eilėraštį apie akumuliatorių. Nesukurps. Vilčių nepateisinti, nes skaičiuoja varnas. Poetas numeris 7 siaubingai jaudinasi, braukia nuo kaktos prakaitą, nuolat užsikerta, kaži varnos rašo eilėraščius. Ar esame varnų literatūros ekspertų? Ar už varnų poeziją gausiai dalijamos premijos? Poeto numeris 2 niekas nėra girdėjęs. Pakviečia mane, bet prišokęs eilėkalys mėgėjas atima mikrofoną ir skaito pats kažką apie tėvynę. Grįžtu į vietą, prie nesvarbaus poeto palinksta nelobo ir sako, girdėjau, tu laimėsi, tu šiandien geriausias. Pasirodo, čia bus paskelbti nugalėtojai. Verkšas apsala, įtarė, kad nelaboji mulkina, bet poetas numeris 11 iš eilėraščių lanksto papirinius lėktuvėlius ir leidžia į salę. Salės gale ant grindų atsiranda žaltys, publika skubiai sušoka ant kėdžių, ima spiegti, kažkoks prašalaitis užkuria primusą, spirgina lašinius su svogūnais, žada pamaitinti alkstančius. Poetas numeris 4 skaito kažką apie Liepos 14, jam niekas neploja. Kažkas dalyviams pasiūlo alaus, dauguma atsisako, bet vis vien smagu. Pasipiktinusi kolegė sušunka, po galais, kurgi moteris, kur jūsų eilėraščiuose moteris? Ar netiesa, kad mūsų poezijoje rašoma tik apie vyrus? Poeto numeris 1 eilėraščiai kvaili. Prie nykštukų namelio mane užkalbina skustagalvis odinės striukė, sako, žinai, aš irgi rašau, pasikalbėkime apie poeziją. Gal Kitą kartą burkteliu ir sprunku kuo toliau nuo jo, atgal į salę. Poeto numeris 3 eilėraščius daugelis mėgsta. Negi poezija tik dekoratyvus melas. Poetas numeris 10 skaito svyruodamas, galop griūva. Ar knygos galėtų sunaikinti pasaulį? Poetas numeris 8 pameta lapus su eilėraščiais, šie plačiai pasklinda po grindis. Vakaras baigėsi, o aš spėlioju, kodėl jie rašo tokį šlamštą, kam visą tai skaito, leidžia knygas, kam jų gali reikėti. Mane užpuola renginio vedėja ir organizatorė. Jis sako, kad sugadinau vakarą, šaukia ant manęs, mėginu nutraukti, bet ji nesiliauja, ji šaukia, o aš prašau žodžio, ji šaukia, prašau žodžio, galop leidžia man įsiterpti ir aš pasiunčiu ją kuo toliau, visą likusį gyvenimą, ji su manim nesisveikins.
Again, I'll be reading the translation of Rimas Užkuris. An evening of poetry. It's just the beginning, but the photographers have finished flashing and gone home. An old man has fixed himself up in the first row, the last of the modernists. His palm by his ear, he listens closely, then falls asleep. One granny is working on a crossword puzzle, another knits. Poet number 5 flips through pages for a long time looking for a poem. Two people sitting next to each other talk. He complains about his fate, she nods her head. Some people are suffering, but who can tell if it's a toothache or a bad poem? One guy drinks coffee at the bar and doesn't worry about it at all. Poet number 6 talks a lot. He's happy that so many beautiful people are here on this cold night to listen to poems, and he finally leaves, not having read a poem. A telephone rings. A telephone always rings. Someone shuffles in place. Please, have a seat, this chair's free. Someone coughs. Someone always coughs. And someone pulls up a log saying, it's a good thing, useful. Poet number 9 says he can't stand his colleagues who comment on their poems. He reads full of rage. A professor of literature stands up and leaves. He went to barf, says the insignificant poet. The moderator, organizer, of the event gives me an angry glance. A youth who gives us all hope tries to compose a poem in his thoughts about a car battery. He won't succeed. Having failed our hopes, he counts crows. Poet number 7 is terribly nervous, wiping sweat from his brow, stopping and starting. Do crows write poems? Are there experts in corvid literature? Do corvid poets win lots of prizes? No one has heard of poet number 2. They invite me on stage, but some amateur linesmith jumps up and grabs the microphone and reads his own work, something about the fatherland. I go back to my seat. A she-devil leans over to the insignificant poet and says, I heard you're going to win. You're the best today. They're going to announce the winners here. The poor soul freezes up, suspects the devil is messing with him, but poet number 11 makes paper airplanes out of his poems and lets them fly. Suddenly, a garden snake appears on the floor at the back of the room. Everyone jumps on their chairs and starts screaming. Some random guy fires up a Prima stove and starts frying bacon and onions. He promises to feed anyone who's hungry. Poet number 4 reads something about July 14th, and nobody applauds. Somebody offers the audience beer. Most refuse, but still it's fun. An angry colleague yells, damn it, where are the women? Where are the women in all your poems? Isn't it true that our poetry is only about men? The poems of number 1 are silly. By the John door, I'm accosted by a skinhead in a leather jacket who says, you know, I write too. Let's talk about poetry. Maybe some other time, I stammer and scoot away back into the room. Most people like the poems of poet number 3. Is poetry just a decorative lie? Poet number 10 reads while swaying back and forth, then collapses. Can books destroy the world? Poet number 8 drops the pages with his poems and they scatter across the floor. The evening comes to an end and I am left guessing. Why do they write such garbage? Why do they read it out loud? Or publish books? Who could possibly need this? The event moderator, organizer, accosts me. She says, I ruined the evening. She yells at me. I try to interrupt, but she won't stop. She yells. I ask for a word. She yells. I ask for a word. Finally, she lets me get a word in, and I tell her off. Far, far off. She will never say hello to me for the rest of her life.
Poetas ir gėlės, Alvydui Valentai. Liūdniau už nesvarbų poetą po festivalio atrodo tik gėlės, pelnytos išvykoje trukusioje gal 2 dienas. Kelios sumaitotos tulpės, jas gavo paskaitęs miestelio bibliotekoje. Saujelė pakalnučių iš juk sodžiaus mokyklėlės. Rožė patriušusiais žiedlapiais, aplūžusiais dygliais, vieninteliu likusiu lapu iš Ak miesto muziejaus. Žiupsnelis neužmirštuolių iš Oi gyvenvietės. Ir albumas Žiedai tarp žiedų, kurį droviai įdavė pagyvenusi kaimelio literatė, sakydama, tai gal čia jums, jaunam, dar kažkokie žalumynai. Galėjo atsikratyti tomis gėlėmis, galėjo kam nors jas įteikti, bet nepagalvojo iš pradžių, nesumetė kam, paskui nusižiūrėjo, bet nedrįso prieiti. O dabar, kai puokštė galutinai nusivarė nuo kojų, jau regis nepadaru. Jis brangina tas pribaigtas gėlės, kaip brangina ir jas įteikusias moteris, provincijos bibliotekų laumės, literatūros žiniuonės, muziejų fėjas, kultūros vaidilutes. Viena smarkiai krito į širdį. Šiai jis taip pat pasirodė mielas ir nesvarbus poetas žūtbūt nusprendė parašyti laišką, patį šilčiausią laišką ir rašė daugybę laiškų, tik mintyse. Kadaise vykdavo į festivalį kaip į šventę, paskui iš įpročio, dabar pats nežino kodėl. Gėlėmis nukloti poetų takai, tos gėlės jau neužmegs vaisių ir nesubrandins sėklų, mirusios šių gėlių sielos, bet suglebę kūneliai dar tvinksi. Nesvarbus poetas norėtų regėti jas gyvą, žydinčias pievose, parkuose, soduose, darželiuose, vazonuose ant palangių. Išmesti gaila, bet mieliau būtų negavęs. Parsivežęs mėgins bent kelioms dienoms pratęsti jų agoniją. Nesvarbus poetas mano, kad žiedai augalų seksas. Kaip pasijustumėte jūs, gavę puokštę paskerstų įsimylėjėlių, norėtų paklausti, bet nepaklaus. Ir štai su tropiniu maišeliu ant peties, sudužusiu moliniu varpeliu kišenėje, nešinas merdinčiomis gėlėmis, įsikandęs užgesusią nuorūką, būtinai susivėlęs, smarkiai suglamžytas, prisifestivaliojęs, nesvarbus poetas grįžta namo.
Poets and Flowers from Tiitas Aleksejevas. The only thing sadder than an insignificant poet after a festival or flowers garnered on an excursion that lasted for maybe 2 days. A few spoiled tulips he got after reading at, well now, Town Library. A handful of lilies of the valley from the So-So village school. A rose with wilted blossoms, broken thorns. A single leaf remaining from the Town Museum, a swatch of forget-me-nots from the Township, and a photo album of nudes, blossoms among blossoms, that was coyly handed to him by the elderly village literary matron, who said, maybe this is for you, a youth, and always the assorted greenery. He could have rid himself of those flowers. He could have given them to someone else, but didn't think of it. At first, he couldn't think of who, then saw someone, but lacked the courage to approach her, and now as the bouquet has worn itself out, it seems, well, unseemly. He cherishes those finished flowers, as he cherishes the women who gifted them, those pixies of provincial libraries, those sorceresses and museum fairies, those flame maidens of culture. One especially flew into his heart, and he seemed nice to her as well. So the insignificant poet quickly decided to write a letter, the warmest letter, and wrote so many letters, but only in his head. He used to go to the festival as to a holiday, and then he went out of habit, and now he doesn't know why. The paths of poets are strewn with flowers, flowers that will not produce fruit nor harbor seed. The souls of those flowers are dead, but their wilted bodies still throb. The insignificant poet would like to see them alive, blooming in meadows, parks, orchards, gardens, in planters on windowsills. It's sad to throw them out, but better not to have gotten them at all. Taking them home, he'll try to extend their agony for a few days. The insignificant poet thinks that the buds are the sex of plants. How would you feel having gotten a bouquet of slaughtered lovers, he would like to ask, but doesn't. And so, with a cloth bag on his shoulder, a broken clay bell in his pocket, carrying the dying flowers, a rolled up cigarette in his mouth that has gone out. No doubt slovenly, uncombed, all wrinkled up, and all festivaled out, the insignificant poet arrives home.
Thank you, Benediktas. Aitäh, Adam, jälle. Nüüd sa saad, ei, sa ei saa väga palju kohta. Natuke läheb aega veel. Something I remembered for some reason during Benediktas's first poem is that as an organizer, I have not reminded you that we have wine right there next to the door. It's here for you, so feel free to fill your glasses or get a glass of wine. Korraldajana mul ei olnud meeles teile öelda, et vein on ukse kõrval, võtke palun, kes soovivad veini. Ja nüüd me saame jätkata oma õhtut meie enda oma kullakalli poeediga. Kristjan Haljak tuleb nüüd lugema ja Adam ei saa küll paraku puhata, ta loeb neid tõlkeid ka, sest ta on need teinud. Yeah, and our next poet is from Estonia, Kristjan Haljak, and translations again read by Adam Cullen, who has made those translations.
Tervist, and I will perhaps say a few words only in English because it's such an international crowd, and I want to say I'm really grateful to be a part of this project, to be a part of this almanac, and I'm really glad to be here tonight. Mul on väga hea meel, et ma täna saan siin olla ja et ma olen selle almanachis sees. Ja loen teile, I will read you this first part that was published in this almanach, and that will be also published in Estonian in my next book that is called Warszawa Centralna. So I will read this part now. Tišiniše hohsait von doomine elektra. Tihkelt soojalt voolavas vihmas näeme sind sammuvat elektra. Sa surud käed oma fosforesseerivaile rindadele, ei pööra enam pead, tõttad edasi. Ilmar Laaman. 1. Mu kätekirg näib sulle mõistmatu, su öine tukk puudutab mu laupa hullul moel, su kukal ja su suu, su naiivne liilija januneb koos ja lahus hetke kaupa ma mõtlen meie kehad, kui 2 purjus laotuse all tõelised kõlvatuse sõdurid nii süütud, ainult et kevad pole sügisest targem ega vastupidi putukad turnimas meie helerohelistes armastuse kaevudes, uue vilja hele naeratus kirgas ja süüdi madal päritolu algupära taevas. Millest jutustab meile meie nahk, kui korjad linade vahelt eelmiste valguste pudemeid ja su süü ja jalge vahe on, kui tunnelid öös on ainult õhk, mis jääb sinust alla poole taeva trepi vertikaali. Aimab harjunud silm professionaalne armastaja, mitte lits, vaid armastaja. Te ju teate, iga vahekord on tekst, piibel, pärsia vaip või haigus, tervis või võla või vöökiri või.
Through thick, warmly flowing rain, I see you walking, Electra. You press your hands against your phosphorescing breasts, no longer turn your head, and hurry onward, Ilmar Laaban. 1. My hand's passion seems unfathomable. Your nighttime bangs brush my forehead madly on your nape. In your mouth, your naive lily thirsts together, and apart moment by moment, I think our bodies like 2 screams beneath. a drunken firmament, true soldiers of indecency, so innocent, except spring's no wiser than autumn or vice versa, insects crawling in the pale green wells of her romance, a new fruit's bright smile, brilliant and guilty and humble birth in the heaven of origin, of which our skin speaks when you gather remnants of past lights from between the sheets, and your guilt and your groin are like tunnels the night holds, only air beneath you on the stairway to heaven's vertical plane. The trained eye perceives a professional lover, not a slut but a lover. You know every lovemaking is text, Bible, Persian rug, or sickness, health or IOU, or belt pattern or.
Kaks. 100 aastat on läinud mööda, pargis suvi häälitseb, Berliinis suvi häälitseb, tööline esteet, tehnika kasteni on leel, rüüpab vahel, rüüpab veel ja hammustab pool tabletti, roog, müha, voog, tao. Kose mürinad, raevuhood, aastad vaid kadusid, ei kadunud, vaid rikas rikkale, vaene vaesele, väärne vend uuel aastal. Silmaterav igastas okka, pist, liili ja närtsis, poisid otsisid malmist ja higist põtkeid, millest joobuda. Sinu lilla korteris kohtusin ootuspäraselt oma lapsepõlvega. Ta võttis mu vastu nagu haavatud lagle, kes pudeliga seegist tulles tuigub taeva palavaks, teeb kepp ja meeletus. 12 kahvatud kompassi kušeti kõrval, pendlite seinakell, aga see kohtumine on ebapuhas, ta liigutab mind nagu siis, kui poisid naerma hakkasid, nähes duširuumis kandiliste roosidega arabeski minu ihas seal, kus teistel on ei miski kõik.
2. 100 years have passed, summer sounds in the park, summer sounds in Berlin, an unemployed aesthete on a curving chestnut boulevard, sips sometimes, sips again, and bites off half a pill, meal, roar, coarse, tau, cascades, roars, bursts of rage, the years only gone, not lost, only rich, poor to poor, a worthy brother in a new year, pupil pierced by a thorn's prick, the lily-wilted boys sought kicks from cast iron and sweat for intoxication. In your urban apartment, I met my childhood as expected. It received me like a wounded goose, staggering from the almshouse, bottle in hand, heats the sky, fucks in frenzied 12 pale compasses beside the couch, a wall clock, no pendulum, but this meeting is impure. It moves me like back when the boys laughed and seeing me in the showers in arabesque with rectangular roses there in my body where others have nothing, everything.
Kolm. Neitsid laevahukud viimsed kohtupäevad ei ole mulle võõrad. Viimased 30 aastat olin minagi üks nendest, kes oskab kõike, pooleldi alkohoolik, pooleldi kingsepp. Ja kõigist kõige parem radiaatorite seas minu igapäevane viin oli tulevik, suhkruistandused, vaesus, räpasus, transatlantiliste lüpsimasinate lemmikkülaline. Eks me näe, kes viimasena naerab sinu sõnu nii kaua, kuni hävitus ja pidusöök saab otsa. Hävitus armastab mind nagu venda. Mitu korda on vallutajad võtnud mind nagu venda. Mitu korda on vallutajad sõtkunud minu mälestuste rindu. Liblikat, vett, kuju, inimese ja valguse vahel.
3. Maiden shipwrecks, final days of judgment are no strangers to me. The last 30 years, I'm also one of those jacks of all trades, part alcoholic, part cobbler, and the very best of the radiators. The future was my daily drink. Sugar plantations, poverty, filth, the favored guest of transatlantic milking machines. We'll see who has last laugh your words until the feast of destruction comes to an end. Destruction loves me like a brother. Many times have the conquerors taken me as a brother. Many times have the conquerors stomped on my chest of memories, butterfly water, a form between human and light.
4. Nii võib konstateerida, kapitalism on sisemiselt juba kõige väärtuslikuma andnud. Tema barokne nurgeline vorm aga on läinud käsitöösse, igapäevasesse maitsesse muutunud ornamendiliseks. kapitalismi vaimsed isad Platon, Byron, Shelley, Koidula on oma kriisimärgi sellesse voolu põletanud. Nad ei anna enam midagi uut juurde, nad ei anna enam midagi vana juurde. Möödunud sajandi algul peeti Saksamaal ja mitte ainult seal rahvuslikku joont modernseks, ajakohaseks. Pehme ja dekadentlikult udusena äratas aastanäitusele tähelepanu 8-kandiline tehas, Balti Mälu Assamblee.
For you can state it as fact, capitalism has already given its most internally valuable, but its angular Baroque form has gone to handicraft, to mundane taste, has turned ornamental. Capitalism's spiritual forefathers, Platon, Byron, Shelley, Koidula, have seared their crisis mark into that current. They no longer add anything new. They no longer add anything old. In Germany, early in the 20th century, and not just there, people regarded the national trend as modern, opportune, soft and decadently hazy, an octangular factory, excited, a furor at an annual exhibition, Baltic Memory Assembly.
Kõigub tuules siia-sinna, sillutab oma kutsele gravitatsiooni, allutab õunapuud, lombid, allutab naise, kes silmade pilkudes vaatab vihma tuult iseennast heledates juustes. See on algus, kus tuju on pisut psühhedeelne ja algusest lõpuni arusaadav. Naise dramaatilises vormis esinev esteetiline kujund on inimväärses kujutlusvõimes määrdunud ja sealt taas välja projitseeritud elu. Prantsuse kommet, mille järgi rahvad ise oma saatuse otsustasid, ei kiideta enam heaks. Eelnev kujundlik arutlus kultuuri 3 põhiliigi olemusest pärineb Hollandi ajaloolase ja modernistliku kirjanduse impersonaliseerunud klassiku viimasest tõsiselt võetavast unenäost.
5. It sways back and forth in the wind, subjects gravity to its beckoning, subjects apple trees, puddles, subjects a woman who, winking, stares at the rain, wind herself in pale hair. It is the beginning at which the mood's a little psychedelic and understandable from start to finish. The aesthetic image manifesting in a woman's dramatic form is soiled in humane imagination, and life projected from there anew. The French custom by which nations themselves determine their fates is no longer endorsed. The preceding metaphorical discussion of the 3 primary types of being comes from Dutch historians and modernist literature's impersonalized classics' last truly credible dream.
Suunurgas pieteedi rõlge Võru tuksumas rahvusliku omapära hümnis ma kuulun kollektsioon nagu sinagi arhivaar ja sinu naine sfääride süsteemi meelitus möödub tund sind oodates sosinal, et nagu kiusteneib ootamine nagu lennu ootus rahvusvahelises poes Charles de Gaulle'i Lennart meres Schönefeldis päikese kõverat kiiret peegeldumas Concordidura alumiiniumistiivadel, veel üks suits, veel üks lonks, konjakit vaikselt süttiv armastus, pakkimata kohvrid, pihus. Seepärast kirjutangi väikestest komöödiatest pass põuetaskus, konjak joodud ja sosistan siis enda ette, kui vastik on kuuluda kollektsiooni, mille rumal koguja pisikeste sõrmedega mälestusse seob, jäigad nahkköited, uus pehme stiil.
6. Piety's perverted ring pulsing in the corner of my mouth in an anthem of national uniqueness. I am part of a collection, just like you, archivist, and your wife, the flattery of a system of spheres. An hour passes waiting for you at a whisper. But as luck will have it, waiting seems like waiting to board in an international shop at Charles de Gaulle, at Leonard Mary Schönefeld, the sun's bent rays reflecting on a Concorde's duralumin wings. One more smoke, one more sip of cognac, sparkling softly, romance unpacked, suitcases in hand. That's precisely why I write about little comedies. That's precisely why I write about little comedies. Passport in breast pocket, cognac drunk. And I whisper to myself, then how disgusting it is to be a part of a collection, this stupid collector of which ties stiff leather volumes into memory with tiny knots, a soft new style.
7. This is the last one. Kuu kärpis, avardas ja voodis ei paistnud mitte miski väär. Meie parfümeeritud jäljed pressisid läbi kujutluste lingust. Meie huvid leidsid kindla pinna, meie kirki kindla pinna peatumatus voolus. Siin sa siis kõlgud, kesksügisene pilt on alles argises, me lebame kolmekesi voodis. Sipakad, tüved, trompet, mustikad maitsevad kuuldamatult helle idavad võrgud kase ja männiõlist niiskete kehade peale. Siis sina suu lahti näitamas pilguga alla, ihu minemas väsimusse, kui mälestus vägivallast vaibus. Keha, kas mäletad kurja veetlevat jõudu, õela haprat puudutust, maailma must, valge, mosaiigi paindumatut rangust. Siis hommikul otsib igaüks üles oma muuseumi, joob kruusist Valentinesi või metaksat või mõnd muud rikaste vaeste jooki ja nikutab peaga, võtab istet puhtale kušetil ja kirjutab puhtale lehele sinise pastapliiatsiga 2 rida vana poplaulu refräänist.
7. The moon cropped broadened and nothing false could be seen in bed. Our perfumed prints pressed their way through the loop of fantasies. Our interests found solid ground, even our passions solid ground in unstoppable current. So this is where you dangle amid autumn's scene, still in its mundanity. We lie in bed, the three of us, slender trunks, trumpet blueberries, taste inaudibly, cast nets of birch and pine oil over our damp bodies. Then your mouth open, showing, gazing down, body turning to exhaustion when memory of the violence subsided. Body, do you remember the enticing evil force, malicious, fragile touch, a world black and white, white mosaics, inflexible rigidity. Then, in the morning, each locates their museum, sips Ballantines or Metaxa, or some other drink of the wealthier, pour from their mug, and nods, sits down on a clean couch and writes on a clean sheet with a blue ballpoint pen 2 lines from an old pop song's refrain.
Suur aitäh, Kristjan ja Adam jälle. Nüüd Adam saab tõesti päriselt puhata. Aitäh sulle, et sa oled kõiki tõlkeid lugenud täna. Sest meie tänane viimane autor, aga ta ei ole siin almanahis. Ta ei ole siin almanahis sugugi viimane. Meil on siin 20 autorit ikkagi. On Läti kirjanik, lavastaja, näitleja, ajakirjanik, kõiges väga andekas inimene Svenas Kuzminas, kes siin ajakirjas esineb nimega Sven Kuzminas, kes kirjutaski oma teksti inglise keeles ja see on siis meie tänane ainuke proosapala. Ja tegelikult siin almanahis on ka selline intervjuu sektsioon, kus kõikidelt autoritelt on küsitud 4 küsimust. Ja 4 nendest küsimustest on Will national literature still exist in 100 years? Why or why not? So our last author from this magazine, but it's not the last author because we have 20 brilliant authors here, is Svenas Kuzminas, who is an actor, a poet, a man of many arts, who has written his text in English originally. So Adam finally has the chance to take a break and enjoy the wine. But thank you for reading all those texts. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that in this almanac, we have this editorial section or this interview section where all of the authors, living and deceased, were asked 4 questions. And the 4th question was, as I read, will national literature still exist in 100 years and why or why not? And I really loved Sven's answer to that question. It was, what do you mean? We barely just started. Welcome, Sven.
Thank you, Maria, for reminding me about that answer. Yes, that is true. National literature is a fairly modern development. And some time ago, Thomas approached me with the offer to contribute something to the magazine. And he said, well, do you have a short story that would fit the description of something that might, translate well and transcend borders? I thought, well, yes, I probably do. And then I thought, well, what borders? There are quite a few borders that I could transcend, but then isn't translation in itself also a border, as it makes literature available through one language? And, I went down into this rabbit hole of conceptualizing what a border really means, and as a result, I may or may not have written something that transcends time and space. Or maybe it doesn't. Remains to be seen. Anyway, it's a long one, so please don't mind. I'm going to sit down. Thank you, Anna. No. Fine like this. Yeah. This one's called All Things American, but it's pronounced All Things American. In previous life, I lived in the West, a capitalist country, as they say. I believe it, otherwise, how my English so good? They did not teach us English in school. It was normal Soviet school with Russian literature, Marxist-Leninist ideology, Fizkultura, history of the party, and for some reason French. We had neither English television nor English radio anywhere, so I was born with English in my brain. An English-speaking capitalist country then. But that's where I spent at least one of my past lives. I believe it. I also believe that it was America rather than Britain. Several facts point to this. Firstly, I love all things American. I love rockabilly music. I love motorways. I love jeans. How? They don't make jeans here. They vilify all things American. They vilify jeans. In school, they told us that jeans have syphilis in the seams. The CIA plants syphilis in the seams of jeans, they say. This is not true. I can testify. Secondly, I enjoy Coca-Cola. And I've never even drunk in Coca-Cola. Yet I know and love how it tastes in my mouth. The other week, my friend Andrei Platonovich and I went to the beer drinking place. We go sometimes, it's a casual. It was late in the afternoon and the queue at the kiosk was quite long, as is the case in busy hours, which are almost all of the hours. Naturally, we had fears of shortage, so Andrei Platonovich had also brought some aquavit in his portfolio, purely as a prophylactic measure, of course. We got our beer and stood at one of the tables outside. Andrei Platonovich had a sip. He is a man of science, an alchemist of sorts. I have observed a certain phenomenon, he said, smacking his lips appraisingly. The beer is pretty good in the morning, but the stuff they serve after lunchtime is unfit for human consumption. Right, screamed the man at the next table over. It's piss is what it is. Urin, said Andrei Platonovich, unlike this stuff, is at least sterile. I could not but agree. He unclasped his portfolio, looked around so as not to arouse suspicion, and carefully produced the bottle of aquavit. We hid our mugs under the table, and Andrei Platonovich disinfected our beers with a hearty splash of spirits. We drank the liquid, putrid as it was, but at the very tip of my tongue, I could still feel it, the cool, sweet, effervescent flavor of Coca-Cola. I had carried the memory of it to this mortal body from within the veil. And thirdly, but not lastly, my being brought here from America by way of reincarnation is proven by the fact that back in '72, I cheered for Bobby Fischer instead of Boris Spassky. Strange, I know. Andrei Platonovich still holds this against me. One day at the beer drinking place, he brought it up again. Damn near accused me of treason. I said in defense that my admiration for Fischer has nothing to do with politics and is based entirely on the superiority of his play. Prove it on the battleground then, said Andrei Platonovich, and produced an old chessboard. We had another round of the good stuff, it was early in the day as I recall, and lay out the pieces. Andrei Platonovich is a fine player, but fatigue and poor nutrition had gotten the best of him, while I myself had learned a great deal from studying Bobby Fischer's game in an import magazine, so the match ended with Andrei Platonovich not spotting a checkmate in 3. I must admit I got a little bit excited. I had proven to my friend the power of all things American. He moved his last standing knight awkwardly, still oblivious of the inevitable defeat. A small crowd had gathered around us. Naturally, I wanted to deliver my penultimate move in style, pronouncing a simple checkmate whilst pushing the lopsided white queen, which Andrei Platonovich himself had carved out of a door handle to replace a missing one, somehow didn't feel sufficient. I recalled how old-timers in the park always yell "Ryba" as they slap their last domino piece on the bench. I wanted to produce a similar effect. I delivered my checkmate with a flourish, drawing circles in the air with my queen right before placing it on Victory Square. It was time to say the word. But somehow at the very last moment I got confused in all the tension and the word escaped me. Which is why, in order to compensate, I shouted out "Chess!" and punched Andrei Platonovich in the face. He fell to the ground, defeated. I felt terrible. I didn't want to punch him in the face. I don't punch people in faces. Then again, what is this I that my mind keeps referring to? Because something or someone did punch Andrei Platonovich in the face. Something or someone did break his secret spectacles, which he later repaired with isolation tape. And I strongly believe this something or someone to be the deceased American, still very much alive within me. Then, of course, there are the flashbacks. Glimpses of unfamiliar past that pull me away from the here and now, as Dr. Pokrovsky says. The first such glimpse was in my childhood. I very well remember kitchen in a communal apartment, clotheslines and boiling cauldrons everywhere, my mother sitting at the table, smearing buttered breads and listening to Berlioz on the radio. I'm running around to the music with my wooden moon rocket, making space noises by loose lips. And then suddenly I stop. Something is not right. I am lost in time, as if squeezed into the dead, motionless space between seconds, one that theoretically doesn't even exist within the framework of our perception. And in that non-existent shred of time, I remember things. Strange, unfamiliar things. But then the moment passes, mother gives me a buttered bread and I forget all about it. Only the next day I remember those things again, but this time also remember myself remembering them the day before. And so on, you know, every single day I surprise how good I still remember it all. Well, I don't remember the strange things quite as well as I remember remembering the strange things, of course, but here are some, for example. Strange thing number 1, wallpaper flowers. Mother and I had a big room that used to be a study before previous owners were executed. It was nice. Had a desk, had some beds, had an old buffet with beautiful drawers, and also had those super flowery wallpapers which I speak of. As a child, I liked how the patterns on them weaved around, endlessly intertwined like tails or tongues or tentacles. I would look at them for long times, so much long that when I blink and take a step back, the whole pattern would have changed, and with it, the whole place. I remember that the new place was also a lovely place, but less lovely. I mean, it was probably fancier and tidier than our communal apartment, but there was coldness in the air, as if someone had just died. Then I blink again and be back in Leningrad, but the image of the unfamiliar room would linger. Interesting thing number 2. Man. Sometimes in that place was man. He was big man. Dr. Pokrovsky says that it was a passing image of my absent father. I don't believe it. I never knew my father. All I knew was that he'd most likely fought in the war. He met mom just briefly, gave her tripper. Oh well. My man was different man. I didn't see my man in the memories, but oh how I felt his presence. It was terrifying, dreadful, but also highly erotic, sexy, as they say. Which is one of the reasons why I never discussed the subject with Andrei Platonovich. If I did, word would get out at the beer drinking place and no amount of chestnutship would help preserve my dignity. Interesting thing number 3. Ladies. Lots of ladies talking, sad things and smoking. Nothing erotic about them. Not like when I was married, for instance. I was married sexily. She didn't really like me, the woman I was married to, but she liked my room in the communal apartment, and in some ways the room is a physical extension of the person inhabiting it, so I guess that's fair. Anyway, she was too popular, so we separated. She's a good woman, works in a place that has something to do with food, I think. Marishka for short, which is funny because her name is actually a bit longer than me. Interesting thing number 4. Food. There was always something cooking in our giant communal kitchen. It was like a factory, constantly full of steam. Most of the time somebody boiled cabbage soup. I remember how it smelled. It smelled of cabbage soup, but not of very good. Everyone made commentaries about it. My wife Marishka from the food place would open the lid on the cauldron and say, "She," to which our neighbor, Leontin Osipovich, a retired civil engineer, would reply, "Хуй была she." Such was not the food in my trans-incarnational memories. In those memories, the food was entirely of my design and perfect in every sense. Mainly it was mother's butter breads. She made such excellent butter breads. I never do. I don't like the knives. Also interesting, the other day I went for a walk. Spring was late as usual. The streets were littered with remnants of snow. Blocks of ice still floated in the canals. I looked up at the crumbling facades with statues of muscular men holding balconies on their shoulders. Occasionally I crossed the street at the sight of a stray dog or a uniform. I gave a cigarette to a bunch of pioneers under an archway, checked out dusty shop windows, pushed through the regular crowd at the metro, and suddenly I had the strangest revelation that I have no idea what's going on. I had zero understanding of the world around me. I'd lived in this place for years without realizing that it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Leningrad is a city of ghosts. The ghost of Pyotr the Great lurks under every canal bridge. Phantoms of failed revolutions mix with the elements. You breathe 1905 through your lungs and you drink 1917 from the faucet. I too was a ghost, even though very much alive from a biological standpoint. I was from a different time and a different place, a place of jeans and music. The memories were back in an instant, of course, but this time they all fit together nicely, like tiles. All I had to do was fill in the blanks with my intuition. So I clicked my fingers. Click, here I stand in a room with flowery wallpapers. Click, there are voices all around me. Click, the terrifying yet very intimate feeling that the man will appear any minute, whereupon all the ladies in the room except me will have to go. Click, I am in a kitchen again, but not in a communal kitchen, no, a modern American kitchen with a big fridge and a gas cooking oven. Click, I am at the oven cooking food for the man in the kitchen. I am a housewife, an American housewife. The year is 1940 something. I am terrified, but also angry. I want to punch something or someone in the face. A few years after the war, I will die. Yes. Shortly after that, Marishka came over. She needed to get some of her things from the apartment and also money. I gave her money and things. We went to the kitchen for some reason. Have you been well? She asked. Yes, I said, I've been very well, thank you. She pushed on. But really, I'm worried about you. You look tired. Have you been eating? Sure, I've been eating. What is it with her? Always on about eating, as if nothing else matters in the world. Well, maybe it doesn't. We stood in silence for a while. Then she gave me a look. One of those looks, you know, as if measuring me with her eyes. Hell, I thought, this is uncomfortable. I'm not sure how long I can keep this up. Maybe I should say something like, I need to go, or you need to go. Somebody needs to go. I remember opening the cutlery drawer. An assortment of knives was inside. I never touched them things, never liked them for some reason. But this time I opened the drawer with a slow, methodical movement. The blades were all razor sharp. Leonid Osipovich kept them that way. What are you doing? She said. Oh, nothing. How's Andrei Platonovich? Fine-ish. Still recovering from that mild concussion you gave him. Ah, yes, that. Tell him I'm sorry. It's fine. He says he's sorry as well. How noble of him, I said, to feel sorry for me. She took a step forward, put her hand on my shoulder and said, I am sorry too, you know. Great. Everyone's sorry all of a sudden. Everyone's so sorry for everyone else. A lid went rattling on the cauldron. Oh, Marishka said with a smile, she? I reached inside the drawer. One step, that's all it would take. One quick, precise, diagonal step under the ribs and maybe a little clockwise twist just to be sure. And that would be it. Nobody would have to feel sorry anymore. Steam was rising from the cauldron, more and more steam. The lid was roaring like an engine now. What is happening to me? Where did all these murderous thoughts come from? I didn't want to stab Marishka. I was sorry as well, perhaps the sorriest creature of them all. And yet my hand was in the drawer, reaching for the thickest handle it could find. My man will be home soon. He will steer his Buick into the driveway, turn the engine off, walk through the front door, hang his coat and hat on a coat and hat hanging thing and say, honey, I'm home. There will be soft jazz on the radio, pot roast in the oven and Coca-Cola in the fridge. Something will be wrong, of course. No matter how hard I try, something will detonate his anger again. It always does. It's like he can't control it. It comes from a different place, a different time. But I don't know it yet. It will take me at least one more lifetime to even formulate a theoretical basis for understanding how things actually work. Right now, all I see is my husband waiting for me to give him a beer, serve him dinner, and maybe some sexual favors. He will grab me by the wrist, slap me on the cheeks, press my face against the checkered tablecloth like he's done so many times before. In his great country, you are what you do. He is the moneymaker, the driver of Buicks. I am the cook, the cleaner, the human can opener. But today I am also the one whose right hand is in a drawer. What's wrong, honey? Says the driver of Buicks. Have you forgotten where the beer is? He rolls up his sleeves and takes off his watch. I reach into the drawer. I said, he repeats, have you forgotten where the beer is? I wrap my fingers around the knife handle. Smoke is coming from that fancy American oven. Thick, black smoke. A band of galloping horses flashes before my eyes. They kick up a cloud of dust with their hooves. I look around, and the horses are gone. I take a deep breath, a lunge forward, My husband just stands there with a funny look on his face. He's too perplexed to even step aside when I plant the blade under his ribs. He purses his lips as if pronouncing the letter O, and his eyes are little O's as well, but smaller, like O. He grabs my hand and tries to manipulate it in some way. It is a purely instinctive reaction, of course. Once you've been stabbed, you can never unstab yourself. You can't control everything, baby. That's not how it works. I twist the knife around, trying to tickle the heart with the tip of the blade. Something hot and sticky covers my hand as he leans on it with all his weight. His eyes are quite large now, like, oh. Maybe he's trying to say something. Maybe he isn't. I don't know. I don't remember, but he gurgles and spits into wallpaper, flowers weave and twirl like a jungle in a storm, and in a moment or two, it's over. Just like that. He is somewhere else. And so am I. I am in Leningrad, in a kitchen, hugging my ex-wife and crying. Crying as loud as I can so as to silence all things American in my head. Please go away, I cry, please, leave me alone. And without a word, she does. I am a universe within a universe. Every person I've ever been still lives within me. I don't think there's any dispute about that. Perhaps one of the molecules in my body is a planet called Earth with a country called America on it, where a woman named Janet, that is how I name her now, stuffs a man named Bill into the trunk of a car called Buick. She drives into a forest in order to bury his corpse 6 feet under the surface of my earthy molecule, and I myself now walk a molecule of someone whom I will once become. Admittedly, sometimes I feel like I'm in hell. I tell this to Dr. Pokrovsky sometimes, and it's casual. He asks me what hell is. In your personal opinion, of course, he adds. I believe that hell is a kitchen, I say. A kitchen. Yes, a modern American kitchen with a gas oven and a fridge. He strokes his chin and looks at the ceiling for a moment, then turns to me and says, interesting. I've always been more partial to the idea that hell is other people. Which makes sense if you think about it. I am, after all, in many other people. It's not an obsessive thought, of course, but why not? I believe it. I very believe it.
Thank you, Svens. Aitäh, Svens. Meie Balti kirjanduse ja No More Amberi õhtu lõpetab Tiitas Aleksejev, Eesti Kirjanike Liidu esimees, kes on olnud Balti Kirjanike Liitude koostöö eestvedajaid juba mitu aastat ja kes on lõpuks pääsenud kõrgematelt korrustelt siia alla oma sõna ütlema. So the evening of No More Amber and this Baltic event will be ended in one way by Tiitas Aleksejevas, who's the chairman of the Estonian Writers Union and who has been guiding us through this Baltic cooperation project for years, and who has finally had the chance to come downstairs from an event that happened upstairs. And so yeah, just let's make a warm welcome for Tiit, and after that you can still stay and have a glass of wine and talk to the authors if you wish. And from my behalf, I wish you a good evening, and I'm really grateful for you, for all of you for coming here. Thank you.
Good evening. The idea was to open this presentation, but now at least I can close it, and sorry for being late. I had to to direct a conversation about historical crime, and we all do commit some crimes, historical or not. But I know that Maria runs tight ship whenever she goes. So, thank you, Maria. And this conversation upstairs, it was about the 1930s among other things, and 1939 included. I've written some stuff about this year as well. And the one thing I learned about 39 and Baltic states is that together we stand, together we fall. So we better know each other. And if we fall, may it be only from excessive consumption of booze, and not for any bastard who decides to wage war against us. So, but this is a grim talk. I don't want to speak that. I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank you, Maria and Maria from Lithuania. I'd like to thank Adam, Toms, Rinas, whom I can't see, and many other people. These have been great ties in Riga and in Vilnius and in Tallinn and in Tartu to be. This is great to see you, actually, and I'm glad that this magazine is finally done, because they say that writers say things. Word is a writer's weapon. Lawrence of Arabia says that, well, actually, I know that the pen is stronger than a sword, but when Arabs charge at me, I know as well which one I'd like to hold in my shaking hand. But we have this magazine now, and this is the word, and this is the action, and may these two be married forever and ever and ever. Thank you very much.
I apologize for keeping you for just one more minute. On behalf of the organizing team of Prima Vista, thank you for coming and presenting this magazine today here on the first day of festival. And actually, I was just thinking about my first reaction when Benediktas told me about this launch of the magazine and the idea of presenting it at the festival. My first reaction was, oh yes, it's the Three Baltic States literary magazine, you know. And then it hit me that, oh, okay, it's the first issue. Yeah. Because it was so peculiar that it didn't exist before. So I'm really glad it does now, and thank you very much for coming here, presenting it, and it was a really nice experience. Thank you.
Thank you!
Lisaksin ainult, et muidugi meil on ajakirjad siin müügil, saab osta 10 eurot, mis on väga mugavalt ka ühes pabertükis rahas, võib anda ja lugeda kõik. Et if you would like to purchase a copy of the magazine, it's also available here too. 10 euros, very neat and easy single banknote, and we take credit cards, but we don't give them back. So, have a good night.